everyone. This is the Gospel for the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time from Matthew. Jesus spoke this parable to his disciples. The kingdom of heaven is like a man on his way abroad who summoned his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to a third 1, each in proportion to his ability. And then he set out. The man who had received the 5 talents promptly went and traded with them and made 5 more. The man who had received 2 made 2 more in the same way. But the man who had received 1 went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now a long time after, the master of those servants came back and went through his accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more. "Sir," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 talents. Here are 5 more that I have made." His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have shown you can be faithful in small things. I will trust you with greater. Come and join in your master's happiness." Next, the man with the 2 talents came forward. "Sir," he said, "you entrusted me with 2 talents. Here are 2 more that I have made." And his master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have shown you can be faithful in small things. I will trust you with greater. Come and join in your master's happiness." Last came forward the man who had the 1 talent. "Sir," he said, "I had heard you were a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered. So I was afraid, and I went off and hid your talent in the ground. Here it is, it was yours, you have it back." But his master answered him, "You wicked and lazy servant. So you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered. Well, then you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have recovered my capital with interest. So now take the talent from him and give it to the man who has the 5 talents. For to everyone who has will be given more, and he will have more than enough. But from the man who has not, even what he has will be taken away. As for this good-for-nothing servant, throw him out into the dark, where there will be weeping and grinding of teeth." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So in that Gospel, we're introduced to a man who entrusts his property to his servants while he's abroad. He's an enterprising employer who hopes that his own flair and daring in business matters will be reflected in his servants' attitude to this new challenge. He doesn't instruct them what to do with the talents. He trusts them to use their own initiative and imagination in this economic venture. And as in all stories and jokes with 3 characters, our attention is focused on number 3. The third servant is portrayed as the one who refuses to involve himself in the spirit of the enterprise. He believes that the safest way to handle his talent is to bury it and return it intact to his master. Jesus here is seen to be making a point against the scribes and the Pharisees. Their chief aim was to keep the law, which they had been given, exactly as it was, not to change it, not to develop it, not to alter it in any way. In their own phrase, their mission was to build a fence around the law. It's as if they wanted to put the law into a state of perpetual coma or paralysis. And that way they would avoid the risk of its walking the streets, where it would have to change and grow according to the conditions it met. Better to keep the law in an oxygen tent under continuous surveillance and keep it alive on hot air. Like the man with the one talent, the Pharisees are seen to have an investment in keeping things exactly as they were. And it's precisely for that stale attitude that Jesus condemns them. In this parable, Jesus tells us that there can be no religion without risk, no religion without adventure, no religion without enterprise. Willingness to dare is an essential part of our faith. The parable speaks to us about God. Through the story, we are invited to imagine a God who bestows gifts on all of us, and so we are gifted. He is a God who gives talents to all of us, and so we are talented. What matters is not what people's talents are, but how they are used in the service of the kingdom. The parable imagines God as a gambler, one who is forever taking risks in entrusting us with his gifts. He has no guarantee on his return, but that is the risk. He dares us to share a common enterprise, and he trusts us to do it in our own way, knowing that if it succeeds, both his will and ours will be done. The parable also explores different attitudes to God. The first two servants have a completely different attitude to their master than the third. They know that their master is expecting them to share his business attitude for the sake of possible advantage. They know that he expects them to travel on his trust and share his go for broke style. The third servant shares none of this, regarding his master as a fierce, exacting man. He's afraid of his master, so he plays out his fearful attitude by becoming an undertaker to the talent he has received. Instead of rejoicing in his talent, he organizes a quiet funeral service. To lose nothing, he risks nothing, and not surprisingly, nothing comes of it. Now, the defense of the third servant is interesting. He focuses on the reputed meanness of the master and not on his own proven lack of enterprise. He takes the problem away from where it is, with himself, and places the problem where it is not, with his master. He portrays his master as harsh, and there's no admission that his own creativity leans towards the cemetery. He ends up burying part of himself, and we know that we should only bury what is dead. We can ask ourselves today how we imagine God and how the way we see him influences our attitudes and behavior. Is God an exacting master who demands that we return to him exactly what we have been given? Is he a gambler and an adventurer who lives in the fond hope that we will live in the spirit of his trust? Our faith begins with God. God risked his own son, the talent of his life, and he takes a risk with us, with you and me, every day. It seems only fair that we should return the favor and take a risk with God. Have a lovely Sunday. Thank you.